I
There's
still
no need to
remember the
cause a
way my
scene.
daughter's
As
voice
I
cut
just
through the
told you, the
bank that
funds are
morning.
simply not available,
Sharp, cold,
and this account
and
was
loud enough
closed
for
last
everyone
month.
to hear.
This
Mom,
is highly
stop pretending
inappropriate.
this
We discussed
matters.
this. I
You don't
know,
even
but I
have
didn't know
money,
where else to turn.
Emily said, crossing her arms like I was a
What do you think
stranger.
she did?
Then she laughed, soft but cruel. You're poor. You've always been. Every head turned. I felt my throat close. My hands trembled around my worn purse. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I turned to leave, and that's when a man stepped forward. Mrs. Reed, please wait. The bank manager was looking straight at me, and suddenly everything changed. If this moment made your heart tighten even a little, I'd really like to hear from you. Have you ever been judged or misunderstood by your own family? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single comment, and if you want to stay with me through this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly means more than you think. I didn't always feel like a stranger in my own daughter's life. There was a time, years ago, when Emily Carter used to reach for my hand before crossing the street. When she would sit at the edge of my bed at night, asking me questions about everything and nothing at all. Back then, she didn't care what I wore, or how small our house was, or whether the car I drove made any noise when it started. Back then, I was just Mom. I still remember the little yellow kitchen we had in Ohio. The cabinets were old and the paint was peeling near the sink. But Emily used to say it was her favorite place in the world. Every Sunday, I'd make pancakes, and she would stand on a chair beside me trying to flip them before they were ready. Most of them ended up folded in half, sometimes burned on one side, but she would laugh like it was the greatest thing she had ever done. I held on to those moments longer than I should have, because somewhere along the way, things changed. After my husband passed away, everything became quieter. The house, the mornings, even the nights. I took on more work than I probably should have at my age, filing paperwork for a small accounting office during the day, helping a neighbor with bookkeeping on weekends. I told myself it was temporary, just enough to keep things stable for Emily. She was in college by then, bright, ambitious, determined to build a life that looked nothing like mine, and I was proud of her. I still am. But success did something to her that I didn't expect. At first, it was small things. She stopped calling as often. Then she started correcting the way I spoke. My words, my tone, even how I pronounced certain things. Once at a restaurant, she gently pushed my hand away when I reached for hers across the table. She smiled, but it wasn't the kind that reached her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, glancing around. "People are looking." I remember pulling my hand back slowly, pretending I understood. After that, she began choosing places I wouldn't normally go, expensive restaurants, quiet lounges with dim lighting, and menus I couldn't pronounce. I always felt like I didn't belong there, like I was stepping into someone else's life. And Emily? She looked like she belonged everywhere. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect confidence. I tried to keep up. I really did. I bought a new blouse once, something I thought looked elegant. When I wore it to meet her, she looked at me for a second too long before saying, "It's nice, Mom." But maybe something simpler next time. Simpler. I went back to my old clothes after that. It wasn't just the way she looked at me. It was the way she talked about things. Money, especially. Emily never said it directly, not at first, but there was always something in her tone. A quiet judgment. A distance that kept growing every time she mentioned her investments, her clients, the deals she was closing. "You wouldn't understand," she said once, scrolling through something on her phone. "It's just a different level." I nodded like I agreed, because maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't understand her world anymore. Still, I never stopped believing she loved me. Even when the calls became shorter. Even when holidays felt more like obligations than celebrations. Even when she forgot my birthday one year and sent flowers 2 days late with a note that looked like it had been typed by someone else. I told myself she was busy. That's what mothers do. We make excuses for the people we love. Then 3 days before everything happened at the bank, my phone rang. I remember staring at the screen longer than usual when I saw her name. Emily. I picked up immediately. "Mom, I need you to come with me to the bank this Friday," she said. No greeting, no warmth, just straight to the point. "The bank?" I asked. "Is everything okay?" Yeah, it's fine," she replied quickly. "I just need you to sign a few documents. It's for a financial arrangement. It'll make things easier moving forward." I frowned slightly, shifting the phone against my ear. "What kind of documents?" There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for me to notice. "Just standard stuff," she said. "Nothing complicated. I'll explain when you get there." Something about her tone made me uneasy. Emily had always been direct, precise. She liked control, clarity, structure. But this felt rushed. Avoidant. "Can you tell me now?" I asked gently. "Mom," she sighed, and I could hear the impatience creeping in. "It's just paperwork. Please don't make this difficult." I swallowed. "I'm not trying to—" "I have meetings," she cut me off. "Just be there at 10 a.m., okay?" And then the line went quiet. I stood there for a moment, holding the phone in my hand, staring at nothing in particular. Something didn't feel right, but I told myself I was overthinking. She was my daughter. I trusted her. Friday morning came faster than I expected. I woke up earlier than usual, even though I hadn't slept well the night before. I stood in front of my closet for longer than I cared to admit, trying to decide what to wear. In the end, I chose something simple, clean, neutral, nothing that would embarrass her. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving. For a moment, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I had changed, but because I suddenly wondered if this was how Emily saw me. Small. Out of place. Not enough. I shook the thought away and grabbed my purse. The same one I had carried for years. The same one I was holding when she called me poor in front of everyone. But at that moment, standing in my quiet living room, I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that I was about to walk into a bank with my daughter. And something inside me whispered that I might walk out of it differently. By the time Friday morning arrived, I had already replayed that phone call in my head more times than I could count. Something about it had stayed with me, not just what Emily said, but what she didn't say. Just paperwork. Emily had never been careless with words. She chose them the way a surgeon chooses tools, precisely intentionally. So when she brushed something off as just paperwork, it didn't feel like simplicity. It felt like avoidance. Still, I went, because that's what I had always done. I showed up. The bank was downtown, in one of those newer buildings with tall glass windows and polished floors that reflected everything. Your shoes, your posture, even your hesitation. I arrived 10 minutes early, standing just outside the entrance for a moment before stepping in. I wanted to steady myself first. When I walked through the doors, the cool air inside wrapped around me, carrying that faint scent of paper and coffee that all banks seem to have. People moved in quiet, controlled motions, lined up at counters, seated at desks, speaking in low, measured voices. It was a different world from the one I was used to, and once again I felt out of place. I spotted Emily almost immediately. She was standing near one of the private desks, toward the back, dressed in a tailored navy blazer and heels that clicked sharply against the floor whenever she shifted her weight. Her hair was pulled back neatly, not a strand out of place, and she held her phone in one hand, tapping rapidly with the other. She looked successful, like someone who belonged here. When she noticed me, her expression didn't soften the way I had hoped it would. Instead, she gave a quick nod, almost like she was acknowledging a colleague rather than her mother. "You're here," she said as I approached. I didn't want to be late, I replied, offering a small smile. She glanced at her watch. You're actually early, she said. That's good. Something in her tone made it sound less like appreciation and more like relief, as if my punctuality meant one less thing she had to worry about. Have you been waiting long? I asked. No, she said, already turning her attention back to the desk. I just got here. We need to get this done quickly. I have another meeting in an hour. Of course she did. I nodded, clutching my purse a little tighter. What exactly are we signing? I asked again, hoping this time she might give me a clearer answer. Emily let out a small sigh, the kind she used when she thought I was being unnecessarily slow. Mom, it's a financial authorization form, she said. It just allows me to manage a certain account more efficiently. It's standard. Manage my account? I asked carefully. She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Yes, she said, her voice smoothing over quickly. It's just easier if I handle things. You don't need to worry about it. I felt something shift inside me. I don't remember asking for help, I said, keeping my voice calm. Emily looked up at me, then her eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in impatience. I know you didn't, she said, but am offering, because it makes sense, for who I asked quietly. She blinked, clearly not expecting that question. For both of us, she replied, though it sounded more like a rehearsed answer than a genuine one. Mom, you've never really dealt with complex finances. This is just smarter. For both of us, she replied, though it sounded more like a rehearsed answer than a genuine one. Mom, you've never really dealt with complex finances. This is just smarter. The word landed heavier than she probably intended. I've managed fine so far, I said. Emily gave a short, almost dismissive laugh. Fine, she repeated. Mom, with all due respect, fine isn't exactly a strategy. I felt my cheeks warm, but I didn't look away. I'd still like to understand what I'm signing, I said. For a moment, she didn't respond. She just stared at me as if trying to decide whether to push harder or change her approach. Then she smiled. But it wasn't the kind of smile she used to give me when she was little. This one was calculated. Okay, she said, her voice softening slightly. Let's just sit down and go through it. That's why we're here. She gestured toward the desk where a young bank associate was already arranging a stack of papers. Mrs. Reed, the associate said politely as I approached. We have everything ready for you. I sat down slowly, placing my purse on my lap. Emily took the seat beside me, leaning forward immediately. Let's not take too long, she said to the associate. We just need her signature. Her signature. Not her understanding, not her approval, just her signature. The associate nodded, sliding the first document toward me. This is an authorization form, she explained. It allows a designated individual to access and manage certain financial assets on your behalf. Assets, I repeated, glancing at Emily. She avoided my eyes. Just read it, she said quietly. I looked down at the paper. The words blurred together at first, not because they were complicated, but because my mind was racing. I forced myself to slow down, tracing each line carefully. There it was. My name, Catherine Reed, and beneath it a section labeled Primary Account Holder. I frowned slightly. Emily, I said, looking up. What account is this referring to? She shifted in her seat. It's just, ma'am, the associate interrupted gently. This authorization would grant your daughter full access to the account listed here, including the ability to make transfers, withdrawals, and other financial decisions. I felt my grip tighten on the paper. Full access, I repeated. Emily leaned closer, lowering her voice. Mom, please don't make this complicated, she said. It's just so I can help you manage things better. Full access, I repeated. Emily leaned closer, lowering her voice. Mom, please don't make this complicated, she said. It's just so I can help you manage things better." "Better than I've been doing myself?" I asked. Her patience snapped just a little. "Yes," she said. "Better." The word hung between us. I looked back down at the document, my heart beating a little faster now. Something wasn't right. Not just with the paper, but with her, with the way she kept pushing, the way she avoided specifics, the way she acted like this was already decided. "Can I see the full account details?" I asked. Emily froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. And in that moment, the uneasiness I had been trying to ignore finally settled into something clearer. Suspicion. The moment I asked that question, "Can I see the full account details?" something changed in Emily's face. It was subtle. If I hadn't known her my whole life, I might have missed it. But I didn't. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers, resting on the edge of the desk, curled slightly inward. And for just a second, her eyes flicked not to me, but to the bank associate sitting across from us, like she was calculating something. "Mom," she said, finally, her voice lower now, more controlled. "We don't need to go through every little detail. That's why I'm here. I've already reviewed everything." "That may be," I replied gently, "but I haven't." The associate glanced between us, clearly sensing the shift in tension. "Of course," she said politely. "I can pull up the full account summary if you'd like, Mrs. Reed." Before I could respond, Emily leaned forward. "That won't be necessary," she said quickly. I turned to her. "Why not?" She exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together. "Because it's going to take time," she said. "And like I said, I have another meeting. We're making this more complicated than it needs to be." I felt something in me begin to harden, not out of anger, but out of clarity. "Then we can reschedule your meeting," I said calmly. "This isn't something I'm comfortable rushing." Her eyes snapped back to mine. "Mom." "No," I said, not raising my voice, but not backing down either. "I want to understand what I'm signing. Completely." The silence that followed was heavier than anything she had said to me so far. For a moment, I thought she might argue again, but instead, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Fine," she said, her tone cooling. "Go ahead." The associate hesitated for a second, then turned to her computer. "Let me just access the account," she said. I watched as her fingers moved across the keyboard, the quiet clicking sound filling the space between us. Emily didn't say anything. Neither did I. But I could feel the tension building, like something just beneath the surface was about to break. After a moment, the associate frowned slightly. "That's strange," she murmured. "What is?" Emily asked quickly. The associate glanced at her screen again. "I'm having trouble accessing the full details from this terminal," she said. "It looks like this account has restricted visibility." "Restricted?" I repeated. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Some accounts, especially long-standing or high-tier ones, require manager authorization to view complete information." Emily let out a short, impatient breath. "Then call whoever you need to call," she said. "We don't have all day." The associate nodded, picking up the phone beside her. "It'll get Mr. Brooks," she said. That name didn't mean anything to me at the time, but it would. It really would. While we waited, I looked down at the document again. My name was still there. Catherine Reed. Clear. Undeniable. But now it didn't feel like just a form anymore. It felt like a line, a decision. And for the first time since I walked into that building, I realized something important. This wasn't just about helping me. This was about control. "Mom," Emily said suddenly, her voice softer now. I looked up. She wasn't looking at me directly. Her gaze was fixed somewhere near my shoulder, like she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "You know I'm just trying to make things easier for you, right?" I studied her face carefully. There it was again, that carefully measured expression. Not quite sincerity, not quite manipulation, something in between. "I don't doubt that you think that," I said. Her brow furrowed slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," I replied, choosing my words slowly, that intention and understanding aren't always the same thing. She stared at me clearly, not expecting that answer. Before she could respond, footsteps approached. Measured, confident, the kind that didn't rush because they didn't need to. We both turned. A man in his late 50s stepped toward us, dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly. His posture was straight, his expression composed, and there was a quiet authority in the way he moved. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I'm Daniel Brooks. I understand there's a request to access a restricted account." "That's right," the associate said, standing slightly as he approached. "Mrs. Reed would like to review the full details before signing." At the sound of my name, something shifted again. Not in Emily this time, in him. Daniel Brooks turned his attention to me, really looked at me, and for a moment his expression changed. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Recognition. "Mrs. Reed," he said, his tone softening just slightly. I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," I replied. There was a pause. Then he gave a small nod, like he had just confirmed something to himself. "I see," he said quietly. Emily straightened in her chair. "Do you know her?" There was a pause. Then he gave a small nod, like he had just confirmed something to himself. "I see," he said quietly. Emily straightened in her chair. "Do you know her?" she asked, a hint of confusion slipping into her voice. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the associate. "I'll handle this," he said. "Please give us a moment." The associate nodded and stepped away. Now it was just the three of us. Emily, me, and a man who was looking at me like I was someone he had been expecting. "Mr. Brooks," Emily said, regaining her composure, "we just need to access the account details so my mother can sign the authorization form." He didn't look at her. Not immediately. His eyes were still on me, and then finally he spoke. "Mrs. Reed," he said, his voice measured, respectful, different from before. "Before we proceed, I'd like to ask you a question." I felt my heart beat a little faster. "What is it?" I asked. He held my gaze. "Did you authorize any transfer of control over your account to anyone else?" The question hung in the air. Sharp. Direct. And suddenly, everything inside me went very, very still. "No," I said. Emily inhaled sharply beside me. "Mom." But Daniel raised a hand, gently stopping her. "Thank you," he said, still looking at me. Then for the first time, he turned to Emily, and whatever calm professionalism he had been carrying shifted into something firmer, something colder. "I'm going to need you to wait," he said. The exact same word, "S," he would say again later. But this time, and whatever calm professionalism he had been carrying shifted into something firmer, something colder. "I'm going to need you to wait," he said. The exact same words he would say again later. But this time, they meant something different, and I could feel it. Whatever was about to happen next, it wasn't going to go the way Emily expected. The words, "I'm going to need you to wait," didn't sound loud, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that shifts the air in a room. Emily blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice tightening. Wait for what? Daniel Brooks didn't rush to answer her. Instead, he pulled out the chair across from us and sat down slowly, placing a slim folder on the desk in front of him. His movements were calm, deliberate, like a man who had handled situations like this many times before. But there was something else, too. Something personal. I need to verify some details regarding this account before any further action is taken, he said, his tone firm but controlled. Emily let out a short, disbelieving laugh. This is ridiculous, she said. We're not asking for anything complicated. It's just an authorization form. My mother is sitting right here. I can see that, Daniel replied evenly. His eyes flicked briefly toward me again, just long enough to make me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. That alone unsettled me, because for the past few years, I had grown used to being overlooked. Then I don't understand the delay, Emily pressed. We have the documents. She's ready to sign. I shifted slightly in my chair. I never said I was ready, I said, quietly. Emily turned to me sharply. Mom! No! I said more firmly this time. I said I wanted to understand. That's different. For a moment, frustration flashed across her face, raw and unfiltered. But just as quickly, she masked it, forcing a tight smile. Of course, she said, though her voice lacked warmth. You want to understand. That's fine. But we don't need to turn this into something bigger than it is. Daniel leaned back slightly, folding his hands. That depends, he said, on what it is. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. I could feel eyes from across the room drifting toward us, subtle at first, then more obvious. People were pretending not to look, but they were listening, watching, sensing tension. Emily noticed it too. Her posture stiffened, her chin lifting just a little higher. She didn't like losing control. I've already explained everything to her, she said, her tone sharpening. This is simply about efficiency, managing assets, making sure things are handled properly. Whose assets? Daniel asked. Emily hesitated. Her assets, she said, gesturing toward me. And you believe she requires assistance in managing them? He continued. Yes, Emily replied quickly. I do. The words came out faster than they should have, like she was trying to stay ahead of something. Daniel nodded slowly, as if processing her answer. Then he turned to me again. Mrs. Reed, he said, his voice softer now. Have you ever granted anyone authority over your financial accounts before? I shook my head. No, I said. And have you requested assistance in managing your assets at this time? No. Emily exhaled sharply. Okay, this is getting unnecessary, she said. You're making it sound like there's a problem when there isn't one. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he opened the folder in front of him and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I couldn't see what was on it, but I noticed something else. His expression. It had changed again. Not just professional, concerned. Miss Carter, he said, addressing Emily directly now. This account you're requesting access to is not categorized as a standard personal account. Emily's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means, he said carefully, that it falls under a different level of oversight, one that requires explicit informed consent from the account holder after full disclosure of its contents. It means, he said carefully, that it falls under a different level of oversight, one that requires explicit informed consent from the account holder after full disclosure of its contents. That's exactly what we're doing, Emily snapped. She's right here. She can sign. She can. Daniel agreed, but not without understanding what she's signing. Emily leaned forward, her patience clearly unraveling. And I've told you, she doesn't need to know every detail. I've already reviewed everything. That was the moment something inside me shifted again. Not confusion this time, not even suspicion. Clarity. She doesn't need to know. The words echoed in my mind, and suddenly I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't about helping me. This was about bypassing me. Actually, I said quietly, interrupting the tension, I do need to know. Both of them turned to me. Emily's expression tightened. Mom, please? No, I said, my voice steady now. I need to know exactly what this account is, what's in it, and why Yuri's so eager to take control of it. For a moment, she didn't respond. And in that silence, I saw it. Not frustration, not impatience, fear. It flickered across her face so quickly that anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Daniel noticed it too. I could tell, because his posture shifted slightly, more alert now, more focused. Mrs. Reed, he said, I believe it would be best if we reviewed the Fuel L account details together. Privately. Because his posture shifted slightly more alert now, more focused. Mrs. Reed, he said, I believe it would be best if we reviewed the full account details together. Privately. Emily's head snapped toward him. Privately, she repeated. Why would you need to do that? I'm her daughter. And I understand that, he said calmly. But as the account holder, she has the right to confidential consultation. That's unnecessary, Emily insisted. There's nothing confidential here. Daniel didn't argue. He simply looked at me, waiting, giving me the choice. And for the first time that morning, I felt like I actually had one. I took a slow breath. I'd like that, I said. Emily stared at me. Mom, you don't need to I'd like that, I repeated a little more firmly. The room fell silent again. This time, the silence wasn't heavy with confusion. It was heavy with something else. A shift, a turning point. Emily leaned back in her chair slowly, her arms crossing tightly over her chest. Fine, she said, her voice cold now. If that's how you want to do this. Daniel stood. Thank you, he said to me. Then with a subtle gesture, he motioned toward a hallway leading to a row of private offices. Right this way, Mrs. Reed. I hesitated for just a second, glancing at Emily. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, her expression unreadable. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't try to read it. I simply stood up and followed the man who seemed to know something that I didn't. Not yet, but I was about to. The hallway felt quieter than the rest of the bank. Not just in sound, but in pressure. Like the moment you step out of a crowded room and suddenly realize how loud everything had been before. Daniel Brooks walked a few steps ahead of me, his pace steady, unhurried. He didn't look back to see if I was following. He didn't need to. I was. Because at that point, I needed answers more than I needed comfort. He stopped in front of a glass door, opening it and stepping aside. Please, he said gently. I walked in. The office was simple. A desk, 2 chairs, a computer, and a small framed photograph turned slightly toward the wall, as if it wasn't meant for display. Daniel closed the door behind us. And just like that, the world outside disappeared. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I stood there unsure whether to sit or wait. Please have a seat, he said. I sat down slowly, placing my purse on my lap again. The same purse Emily had looked at earlier with quiet judgment. The same purse that now suddenly felt. I stood there unsure whether to sit or wait. Please have a seat, he said. I sat down slowly, placing my purse on my lap again. The same purse Emily had looked at earlier with quiet judgment. The same purse that now suddenly felt heavier. Daniel moved to his desk and opened the folder he had been carrying. Then he paused, not looking at the papers, looking at me. "Mrs. Reed?" He said, his voice softer now than it had been out there before. "I show you anything, I need to ask you one more question." I nodded. "Have you ever reviewed this account in person within the last 10 years? 10 years! The number echoed in my mind. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I haven't." He nodded, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "That's what I thought," he murmured. A quiet unease settled in my chest. "What is this account?" I asked. Instead of answering directly, he turned the monitor slightly toward me and began typing. I watched the screen flicker as files opened, layers of information unfolding one after another. There were numbers, dates, documents, things I didn't immediately recognize. But one thing I did recognize was my name. Catherine Reed. Repeated again and again, attached to things that looked bigger than I remembered. My brow furrowed. "I don't understand," I said quietly. "I've had a checking account here for years, but nothing like this." Daniel glanced at me. "That's because what you're looking at isn't just a checking account," he said. He clicked on another tab. "This," he continued, "is a long-term asset account, originally established under your name nearly 22 years ago." 22 years? My breath caught slightly. That was around the time my mind drifted back, unbidden, to a different life, to a time when my husband Robert was still alive, to the long evenings at the kitchen table where he would go over numbers with quiet focus, explaining things I never fully understood, but always trusted. "Kathy," he used to say, tapping a document lightly, "this isn't for now. It's for later, for security, for you and for Emily." I swallowed. "I remember something like that," I said slowly. But after he passed, I thought most of it had been handled, closed out. Daniel shook his head gently. "No," he said. "Not this one." He clicked again. More documents appeared, official-looking ones, signatures, dates, and then a number. I stared at it. At first, my brain didn't process it. It just looked like a string of digits. Too many digits. "What is that?" I whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. He watched my face carefully. "That," he said, "is the current value of the account." The room felt smaller. Or maybe I just felt unsteady. "That can't be right," I said quickly. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," he replied calmly. I shook my head. "No, I would have known. I would have." "You wouldn't have," he said gently. "Not unless you came in and reviewed it personally." I stared at the screen again. The number didn't change. It didn't shrink. It didn't disappear. It stayed there, solid, real. And suddenly, everything Emily had said earlier came rushing back. "You're poor. You don't even have money." A strange, almost hollow feeling spread through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something else. Something deeper. Confusion. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" I asked quietly. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because the account was structured to remain inactive unless accessed directly by the primary holder," he explained. "Your husband set it up that way. He was very specific." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Robert? Of course. He always thought ahead, always planned for things I didn't even consider." "But if this has been here all along?" I opened my eyes again, looking at Daniel. How did Emily know about it? That was the question. The one that mattered. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, He reached into the folder and pulled out a document. He slid it across the desk toward me. I looked down. It was a request form. Authorization. Access. Signed, partially filled. And then I saw it. Emily's name, typed neatly under designated manager. My fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the desk. She came in last week, Daniel said, carefully. She requested preliminary access to review the account, claiming she was acting on your behalf. I looked up sharply. I never authorized that. I'm aware, he said. A quiet tension settled between us. She was persistent, he continued, very confident. She presented herself as someone who already had control and only needed formal confirmation. I felt something cold move through me. Not shock, not surprise, recognition. The pieces were starting to fit together now. Too well. She thought I began slowly that I didn't know. Daniel nodded once. Yes, he said. I leaned back slightly in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. She thought I was irrelevant, I whispered. He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because we both knew it was true. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the screen, at the number, at the life I didn't know I had been carrying quietly all these years. And then another realization settled in, even heavier than the first. Emily hadn't just misunderstood me, she had underestimated me completely. I took a slow breath. What happens now? I asked. Daniel closed the folder gently. That, he said, looking at me with a level of respect I hadn't felt from anyone in a long time, depends entirely on you. And for the first time that morning, I believed him. I didn't rush out of that office, even though part of me wanted to. Even though the weight of what I had just learned pressed so heavily on my chest that it made every breath feel deliberate. Instead, I sat there for another moment, staring at the screen that still displayed a number I couldn't quite accept as mine. Daniel didn't interrupt me. He gave me space, and I realized in that quiet that it had been a long time since anyone had done that for me. Take your time, he said gently. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what time meant in that moment. Time to process, time to feel, or time to decide. Because that's what this had become. A decision. I reached into my purse and ran my fingers lightly along the inside lining, grounding myself in something familiar. Something real. Does she know how much is in there? I asked finally. Daniel shook his head. Not exactly, he said. She was given limited information enough to know the account exists, but not its full value. I let out a slow breath. So she thought I paused, searching for the right words. She thought it was something modest, something she could manage without much consequence. That would be my assessment, he replied. I nodded. That made sense. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained it, and if I had signed that paper, I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate this time. She would have gained full access, he said. Control over transfers, withdrawals, everything. Everything. The word echoed in my mind, heavier now than before. Would there have been any protection? I pressed. There are always safeguards, he said carefully. But once authority is granted, reversing it can be complicated. The word echoed in my mind, heavier now than before. Would there have been any protection? I pressed. There are always safeguards, he said carefully. But once authority is granted, reversing it can be complicated. Complicated. That was a polite way of saying difficult, painful, possibly irreversible. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Emily's voice came back to me again. You're poor. You don't even have money. I opened my eyes slowly. And she wanted this signed today. I said quietly. Yes, quickly. Yes. Without explanation. Yes. Each answer felt like another piece falling into place. And with every piece, the picture became clearer. Not just of what she had done, but of how she had seen me. I sat back in the chair, my posture straightening almost without me realizing it. "Thank you," I said. Daniel inclined his head slightly. "You're welcome." There was a pause. Then he added, "What would you like to do next?" I thought about that, not the way I usually did, carefully weighing every possible outcome, trying to choose the very possible outcome, trying to choose the least disruptive path. No. This time, the answer came differently. Cleaner. "I'd like to go back out there," I said. His expression didn't change, but I sensed a quiet approval. Of course, least disruptive path. No. This time, the answer came differently. Cleaner. "I'd like to go back out there," I said. His expression didn't change, but I sensed a quiet approval. "Of course," he said, standing. "Whenever you're ready." I rose to my feet. For a brief moment, I glanced at the screen one last time. At the number. At the life I had unknowingly been carrying in silence. Then I turned away. Because that wasn't what mattered right now. What mattered was what I did with it. We walked back down the hallway together. This time, I noticed the sound of my own footsteps. Steady. Even. Not hesitant the way they had been before. And when we stepped out into the main area of the bank again, the atmosphere felt different. Not because anything had changed out there, but because something had changed in me. Emily was still sitting at the desk where I had left her, but she wasn't on her phone anymore. She was watching the hallway, waiting. The moment she saw me, she stood up quickly. Finally, she said, relief slipping into her voice. I was starting to think this was going to take all day. I stopped a few steps away from her. For a second, I just looked at her. Really looked. At the confidence in her posture. At the impatience in her expression. At the assumption that everything was still under her control. "Did you get what you needed?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied, already turning back toward the desk. "Then let's finish this." "I told you it wasn't a big deal." "Not a big deal." I walked toward the chair and sat down again. But this time, I didn't feel small in it. The associate returned, placing the documents back in front of me. "Whenever you're ready, Mrs. Reed," she said politely. Emily leaned in slightly, her voice lowering just enough to sound reassuring. "Just sign where it's marked," she said, "and we're done." I looked down at the paper. The same lines, the same words, but they didn't look the same anymore, because now I understood them. Every line wasn't just ink. It was a decision, a transfer, a shift of power. I picked up the pen. Emily watched closely. I could feel it, the expectation, the certainty. She thought she had already won this. I held the pen just above the paper, and then I set it back down. Emily blinked. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked up at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't soften my expression. "I'm not signing this," I said. The words were calm, clear, final. For a moment, she didn't react. It was like her mind needed a second to catch up. "I'm sorry," she said. "I said I'm not signing it," I repeated. Her face changed. Not slowly, instantly. The patience disappeared. The composure cracked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" she said, her voice tightening. "We just spent all this time. I understand what the document does now," I said. "That's the point," she snapped. So you can sign it. So I can give you control, I corrected. The words landed harder than I expected. Emily's eyes widened slightly. That is exactly what it is, I said. The air around us shifted again. People nearby were definitely listening now. I could feel it, but for once, I didn't care. Emily leaned closer, lowering her voice, but the edge in it was unmistakable. You're overreacting, she said. This is just me helping you manage things. You don't even use that account. That account. Not your account. Not your money. That account. I held her gaze. And how did you find out about it? I asked. She froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. She started, then stopped. You went behind my back? I said quietly. No, I didn't, she replied quickly. I was just being proactive. You requested access without my permission. I continued. Her voice rose slightly. Because you don't understand how these things work. The words rang louder than she intended. A few heads turned. She noticed, but it was too late. And then something snapped. Not in me, in her. You've never understood money, she said, her voice sharp now, cutting through the room. You've never had it. You don't know what to do with it. There it was. Again. The same belief. The same judgment. Only now it didn't hurt the way it had before. Because now I knew the truth. And soon, so would she. The moment the words left Emily's mouth. You've never had money. Something in the room shifted. Not just for me, for everyone. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was undeniable. A few conversations nearby went quiet. The soft hum of the bank dimmed just enough for her voice to stand out hanging in the air, like something fragile and sharp at the same time. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because for the first time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. And what I saw wasn't just confidence anymore. It was exposure. She had said too much, too openly, too honestly, and now there was no taking it back. Emily seemed to realize it too. Her shoulders tensed slightly, her eyes darting around the room for a brief second before settling back on me. Mom, she said, her voice lowering again, trying to regain control. That's not what I meant. But it was. We both knew it. It's exactly what you meant, I said quietly. She shook her head, forcing a small, strained smile. No, look, you're taking this the wrong way. I'm trying to help you. Help! That word again. I glanced down at the document in front of me, then back at her. By taking control of something you didn't even tell me existed? I asked. Her expression flickered. I was going to tell you, she said quickly. When? I asked. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, the answer revealed itself. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Emily's patience snapped again, sharper this time. Why are you making this so difficult? She demanded, her voice rising, despite her effort to keep it contained. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. You don't understand how any of this works, and instead of trusting me, you're turning it into a problem. I felt a calm settle over me. Not the kind that comes from peace, the kind that comes from certainty. I understand more than you think, I said. She let out a short, frustrated laugh. No, you don't, she said. If you did, we wouldn't be standing here arguing over something so simple. Simple. I picked up the paper again, holding it lightly between my fingers. This, I said, is not simple. It is, she insisted. It's just an authorization. It's control. I interrupted. The word landed cleanly, precisely. And for a moment, she didn't have a response. Daniel stepped slightly closer, his presence quiet but unmistakable. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, "I think it would be best if we paused this discussion." Emily turned to him, her frustration now fully visible. "Why?" she snapped. "This is between me and my mother." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to, because he said this is no longer just a personal matter. She frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to the associate standing nearby. "Could you please bring the account file?" he asked. The associate nodded quickly and walked away. Emily's eyes narrowed. "What file? The complete account record? Could you please bring the account file?" he asked. The associate nodded quickly and walked away. Emily's eyes narrowed. "What file? The complete account record?" Daniel replied. Her posture stiffened. "We don't need that," she said. "She already said she doesn't want to sign." "That's correct," he said. "But I believe full transparency is appropriate at this point." Her gaze snapped back to me. "Mom, what is going on?" she asked, her voice tighter now, more uncertain than before. "What did he tell you in there?" I held her eyes. For a second, I considered answering, but then I realized something. She hadn't asked me anything before. Not really. Not when it mattered. Not when she should have. So, instead of explaining, I asked. "What do you think he told me?" I said. She blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know," she replied quickly. "Probably just details, technical stuff." "Technical, impersonal, safe." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "Not just that." She shifted slightly, her confidence beginning to crack at the edges. Then, what she pressed. Before I could answer, the associate returned. In her hands was a thick folder, much thicker than the one Daniel had carried earlier. She placed it carefully on the desk, and for a brief moment, everything went quiet. Even the air seemed to pause. Daniel opened the folder, slowly revealing page after page of documents. Official ones, detailed ones. The kind that didn't just summarize, but told the full story. Emily leaned forward slightly, her curiosity now overriding her irritation. "What is all that?" she asked. Daniel didn't look at her. "Mrs. Reed," he said, turning to me, "would you like me to explain this here? Or would you prefer to continue privately?" I thought about that. About the people around us. About the way they were watching, even if they pretended not to. About Emily, standing there, certain, unaware. And then I made a decision. "Here is fine," I said. Emily's eyes flickered with something. Relief, maybe? Or maybe just confidence. She thought this was still under control. Daniel nodded once. "Very well." He turned the first page toward us, and then he spoke. "This account," he said, "was established over 2 decades ago under Mrs. Catherine Reed's name. It has remained active and has grown significantly over time." Emily's expression didn't change at first. Why would it? She still didn't know. Not yet. But then he continued. "The current value of this account places it among our highest-tier client holdings." That was when it happened. The shift. Not in the room. In her. Emily blinked. Once. Then again. "What?" she said. Her voice was quieter now. Not sharp. Not confident. Just confused. Daniel didn't rush. He simply turned another page, pointed to a figure, and let the silence do the rest. Emily leaned closer. Her eyes moved across the page, slowly, carefully, and then they stopped. I watched her face as the realization hit. Not all at once, but in waves. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, and finally shock. That's not right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It is, Daniel replied calmly. She shook her head quickly. No, there's no way. She gestured toward me without looking. She gestured toward me without looking, away from the page. This doesn't make sense. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since we walked into that banking away from the page, she doesn't have this. Doesn't make sense. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since we walked into that bank, Emily was the one who didn't understand. And the truth was standing right in front of her. Unavoidable, unmistakable, and far bigger than she had ever imagined. Emily didn't look at me. Not right away. Her eyes were locked on the paper in front of her as if staring at it long enough might make the numbers rearrange themselves into something smaller. Not right away. Her eyes were locked on the paper in front of her as if staring at it long enough might make the numbers rearrange themselves into something smaller, something safer, something she could still control. But they didn't. They stayed exactly where they were, unmoving, unforgiving. That's not possible, she said again, but this time her voice was thinner, less certain. Daniel didn't argue. He simply let the silence settle, because silence in that moment was louder than anything he could have said. Emily's hand moved slowly across the page, tracing the numbers as if she needed to feel them to believe them. How she whispered, "How is this even here?" I watched her carefully. The confidence was gone now, completely. In its place was something I hadn't seen in her in a very long time. Uncertainty. And underneath that, something deeper. Fear. I didn't know, she said, quickly lifting her head just enough to look at Daniel. No one told me it was this much. I'm aware, he replied calmly. Her gaze flicked toward me then. Brief, sharp, searching. You knew, she asked. I held her eyes. No, I said. Her brows pulled together. What do you mean, no, she pressed. It's your account. Yes, I said quietly. It is. Then how could you not? Because I never needed to. I replied. The words landed differently than I expected. Not defensive, not apologetic, just true. Emily stared at me, trying to make sense of that answer. But you live the way you do, she said, her voice unsteady now. You, your house, your clothes, everything. Everything you judged, I said softly. She flinched, not dramatically, but enough. I didn't, she started, then stopped, because she had. We both knew it. You decided what I was worth. I continued, my voice calm but steady, without ever asking. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I glanced down at the folder again, then back at her. You saw what you wanted to see, I said. The room felt quieter now. Not because people had stopped listening, but because something real was happening, something that didn't need noise. Emily shook her head slowly, as if trying to push away the realization creeping in. This doesn't change anything, she said suddenly, her tone sharpening again, grasping for control. I was still trying to help you. If anything, this just proves my point. You have even more reason to let me manage it. There it was, the pivot, the attempt to recover. I almost smiled, not out of amusement, out of understanding. She wasn't ready to let go of control yet. Manage it, I repeated. Yes, she said quickly, leaning forward again. Mom, this is a serious amount of money. You can't just leave it like this. It needs to be handled properly, invested, protected. It already has been, I said. She blinked. What? For over 20 years, I added. Her expression faltered. That was different, she said. That was Dad. He knew what he was doing. And you don't think I do? I asked. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't say that, she said, but the hesitation in her voice betrayed her. I nodded slowly. No, I said. You didn't say it, but she had thought it, lived by it, acted on it. Daniel shifted slightly beside us. Mrs. Reed, he said gently, the account has been performing well under its current structure. There's no immediate need for intervention unless you choose to make changes. Emily turned to him sharply. Of course there is, she said. You can't just let something like this sit without active management. That's irresponsible. Daniil met her gaze evenly. With respect. Of course there is, she said. You can't just let something like this sit without active management. That's irresponsible. Daniel met her gaze evenly. With respect, he said, it has been actively managed, according to the instructions left by Mr. Reed. Emily froze. Instructions, she repeated. He nodded. Yes, your father established a long-term management plan with very specific guidelines. Those guidelines are still in effect. She looked back at me, slowly, carefully. Did you know about that? She asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. Not in detail, I admitted. Her confusion deepened. Then why didn't you ever check, review it, do something with it? I thought about that, about all the years that had passed, about the quiet life I had lived, about the choices I had made, not out of ignorance, but out of trust. Because I trusted him, I said simply. The answer hung in the air, heavy, complete. Emily's expression shifted again. This time, it wasn't just confusion. It was something more complicated, something uncomfortable. You trusted him, but not me, she asked. I met her eyes. I trusted you, I said, past tense. She heard it. I could tell. Her shoulders dropped slightly. Then why won't you let me help? Now she asked, her voice softer but edged with something raw. I took a slow breath, because this part mattered. Because help doesn't look like taking something from someone without telling them, I said. Her eyes widened slightly. I wasn't taking anything. You were, I interrupted gently. You just didn't think it mattered. She stared at me, silent, and in that silence something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. I thought, she began, her voice faltering. I thought you didn't have anything to protect. There it was, the truth. Simple, honest, painful. I nodded slowly. I know, I said. She looked down at the paper again, but this time not with calculation, with realization, and maybe for the first time that day, regret. The room around us faded into the background. The whispers, the glances. None of it mattered anymore, because this moment was no longer about money. It was about something far more fragile, respect, and the absence of it. Emily swallowed hard, her fingers tightening slightly against the edge of the desk. I didn't mean to, she started, then stopped, because she didn't know how to finish that sentence, and I didn't help her. Because some things needed to be faced fully, without shortcuts, without excuses. I'm going to say this once, I said quietly. She looked up. I am not signing that paper, I continued, her lips pressed together. I understand, she said, though her voice wasn't steady. Do you? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. But I wasn't sure she did. Not yet. Not completely. Because understanding takes more than hearing the truth. It takes accepting it. And she wasn't there yet. But she would be. Soon. The silence that followed felt different from the others. Not tense. Not uncertain. Resolved. Emily was still staring at the documents, but she wasn't searching for answers anymore. She was confronting them. Slowly. Reluctantly. And maybe for the first time in her life without control. I didn't know, she said again, softer this time. Not defensive. Not sharp. Just quiet. I believe you, I replied. She looked up at me surprised. You do? Yes, I said. And I meant it. Because the truth was, if she had known the full extent of it, this moment would have happened very differently. That didn't make what she did right, but it made it clearer. Emily swallowed her gaze, dropping back to the table. I thought it was just a small account, she admitted. Something Dad left that you never really used. I know, I said. I thought you didn't care about it. I nodded again. I know. She let out a shaky breath, running a hand lightly over her forehead. And I thought if I took over, I could actually do something with it. Grow it. Make it better. Her words came faster now, like they had been waiting to spill out. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she added quickly. I didn't think it mattered. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that she wanted control. Not even that she went behind my back, but that she didn't think it mattered. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the table. That's exactly the problem, I said gently. She looked up. When something belongs to someone else, I continued, it always matters. Her eyes flickered with something, recognition maybe, or realization. I didn't see it that way, she said. No, I replied. You didn't. Daniel remained silent beside us, but I could feel his presence, steady, observant, giving space, without stepping away. Emily sat back slowly in her chair. For the first time that day, she looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, stripped of the confidence she had been holding on to. I thought you were struggling, she said. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Struggling? With money, she clarified quickly. With everything. I mean, you never spend anything. You live so simply. I just assumed that I had nothing. I finished for her. She didn't deny it. I guess I did, she said. I took a slow breath. I chose that life, I said. She frowned slightly. Why? The question came out instinctively. Not accusatory, just confused. Because I didn't need anything else, I replied. She stared at me clearly, trying to understand. But you had all of this, she said, gesturing toward the folder. You could have lived differently. I could have, I agreed. Then why didn't you? I paused. Because the answer wasn't simple. Not really. Because I already had what mattered, I said finally. Her expression softened slightly. And what was that? She asked. I met her eyes. You, I said. The word landed gently, but it carried weight. She blinked, caught off guard. Me, she repeated. Yes, I said. Your education, your opportunities, your future. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I continued. Not with money, not with status, not with appearances. Her gaze dropped again. I did, she said quietly. I didn't respond right away, because that was the truth. Not about me, about her. I wanted more, she went on. more than what we had growing up, more than that life. And there's nothing wrong with that, I said. She looked up quickly, surprised. There isn't, she asked. No, I said. Wanting more isn't the problem. Then what is? The way you decide who matters based on what they have. The words settled between us. Heavy, honest. Emily swallowed hard. I didn't realize I was doing that, she said. I think you did, I replied gently. Her eyes flickered, then dropped again, because deep down, she knew. I'm sorry, she said quietly. The words were simple, but they weren't rushed this time. They weren't forced. They came from somewhere real. I studied her face for a moment, looking for something, not perfection, not a complete transformation, just sincerity. And I saw it. Fragile, uncertain, but there. I know, I said. She looked up again. That's it, she asked. You're just going to say you know? I tilted my head slightly. What were you expecting? I asked. I don't know, she admitted. Anger? Yelling? Something. I almost smiled. I've had time to understand things. You're only just realizing, I said. Shh. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? I don't know, she admitted. Anger? Yelling? Something. I almost smiled. I've had time to understand things. You're only just realizing, I said. She frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means, I explained that this isn't just about today. She nodded slowly. I guess not. There was a pause. Then she glanced at the document again. So what happens now? She asked. The question felt familiar, because I had asked it myself not long ago. And now, I had the answer. I keep my account, I said. She nodded. Of course. And you don't have access to it, I continued. Her expression tightened slightly, but she didn't argue. Okay, she said. And moving forward, I added, if you want to be involved in anything that belongs to me, you ask. She held my gaze. I will, she said. There was something different in her voice now. Not authority, not confidence, respect, or at least the beginning of it. I leaned back in my chair, the tension in my body finally easing. Not completely, but enough. Daniel closed the folder quietly, signaling the end of the formal part of this moment. Is there anything else you'd like to review today, Mrs. Reed? He asked. I shook my head. No, I said. I think I've seen enough. He nodded. Very well. Emily stood up slowly, smoothing out her blazer, as if trying to regain some sense of composure. But it didn't quite come back the way it had before, and maybe that was a good thing. Mom, she said softly. I looked at her. I really am sorry, she added. I held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. I know, I said again, but this time it meant something more. For a moment after I said it, after I made it clear that nothing would be signed, nothing would be transferred, and nothing would be rushed, the world seemed to settle, not completely, but enough to breathe. Emily stood there still processing, still holding on to fragments of what had just happened. The version of reality she walked into that bank with no longer existed, and I could see it, in the way her shoulders had dropped, in the way her voice no longer carried that same certainty. But something else was happening too. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. She was trying to rebuild her position. I just need a second, she said, stepping back slightly from the desk. No one stopped her. She turned away, pacing a few steps, running her fingers through her hair, something she hadn't done once all morning. That alone told me everything. Control was slipping, and she didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know, she said again, this time more to herself than to anyone else. I didn't know it was like that. I didn't interrupt. Because this part wasn't for me. It was for her. You should have told me, she said, suddenly turning back toward me. There it was. The shift. From reflection to blame. I met her gaze calmly. Told you what I asked. That you had this, she said, gesturing toward the folder again. That you weren't. She stopped herself, but the word was already there, unspoken, hanging, poor. I tilted my head slightly. That I wasn't what I asked gently. She looked away. You know what I mean, she muttered. No, I said. I'd like you to say it. Her jaw tightened. I thought you didn't have anything, she said finally. Why, I asked. The question landed differently this time. Not confrontational, but precise. She hesitated. Because I thought you didn't have anything, she said finally. Why? I asked. The question landed differently this time. Not confrontational, but precise. She hesitated. Because you never showed it, she said. I nodded slowly, and that gave you the right to assume I asked. No, she said quickly. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? She exhaled sharply. I'm saying I misjudged you. Okay, she snapped. Is that what you want to hear? The sharpness was back, but it wasn't confidence. It was defensiveness. And there's a difference. I don't need you to say anything, I replied calmly. I need you to understand it. She stared at me. I do understand, she insisted. Do you? I asked. The question hung between us. Challenging, unavoidable. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Because this time, she wasn't sure. Daniel stepped in slightly, his voice measured and steady. Miss Carter, he said, I think it would be helpful to clarify one thing. She turned to him, still tense. What? This account was never hidden from you, he said. It simply wasn't presented in a way that invited assumption. Emily frowned. What does that even mean? It means, he continued, that the absence of display does not equal the absence of value. The words were simple, but they landed exactly where they needed to. Emily didn't respond. Because she couldn't. Because for the first time, she was hearing something that didn't fit into the framework she had built her life around. I built my career on understanding value, she said, after a moment, her voice quieter now. I can walk into a room and know what something is worth within minutes. I nodded slightly. I believe that, I said. Then how did I miss this? She asked. There was no arrogance in her voice now, only confusion, and maybe something like fear. Because you weren't looking for it, I said. She blinked. What? You were looking at appearances, I explained. Not substance. She shook her head slowly. No, that's not. It is, I said gently. She fell silent. Again. And this time, she stayed there longer. The fight was leaving her. Not all at once, but steadily, piece by piece. I thought I understood you, she said after a while. I felt something shift in my chest at those words. Did you? I asked softly. She hesitated, then shook her head. No, she admitted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it was honest. And honesty has weight. I thought you were stuck, she continued, like you never moved past where we started. I listened. Because this mattered, I thought I had to pull you forward, she said. And instead, I asked. Her eyes met mine. I tried to take control, she said. The admission was quiet, but complete. I nodded once. Yes, I said. She swallowed hard. I didn't realize how that looked, she added. I think you did, I replied. Her expression tightened slightly. Then why didn't you say something before she asked? The question caught me off guard for a moment, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. Because I kept hoping you would see it on your own, I said finally. She looked down again. I didn't, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't. The room around us felt distant now, muted. Like everything that mattered was happening right here in this small space between us. Emily took a slow breath. Then another. And when she spoke again, her voice was different. Not defensive, not sharp, just tired. I really messed this up, she said. There it was, not an excuse, not a justification, just the truth. I studied her face, and for the first time that day, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability, not the kind that asks for sympathy, the kind that recognizes fault and doesn't run from it. Yes, I said. She nodded. I did. We stood there for a moment. No arguments, no raised voices. Just the weight of what had happened settling into something real and irreversible, but not unfixable. Not yet. She looked at me again. I don't expect you to trust me after this, she said. I didn't answer immediately. Because trust isn't something you give in a moment like this. It's something you rebuild. Slowly. Carefully. Over time. No, I said. You shouldn't. She nodded. I understand. And this time, I believed her. We didn't leave the bank right away. Even after everything had been said. Even after the papers were closed, the folder sealed, and the tension in the room had softened into something quieter, something more reflective. We stayed. Not because we had to, but because neither of us was ready to walk away just yet. Emily stood beside the desk. Her arms no longer crossed her posture, no longer defensive. She looked like someone who had just stepped out of a storm and wasn't quite sure what to do with the calm that followed. I think I should go, she said after a while. Her voice was steady, but not distant. Different. I nodded. You probably should, I said. She hesitated, then glanced back at the folder one more time. Not with greed, not with calculation, but with something more complicated, understanding. I really didn't know, she said again, quieter this time. I know, I replied. She swallowed, and I shouldn't have assumed. No, I said gently. You shouldn't have. There was no harshness in my voice, no punishment, just truth. And somehow that seemed to weigh more. Emily took a step closer. Can I ask you something? She said. I nodded. Why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? She asked. It was a fair question, one I had already asked myself in a different way. I took a moment before answering, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right, because I didn't want money to define how you saw me, I said. She frowned slightly. But it already did, she said. I nodded. Yes, I said, but not because of me. That landed. She looked away for a second, then back again. I thought I was being practical, she admitted. Smart, responsible. You were trying to be, I said. But I wasn't, she said. You were missing something, I corrected. Her brows furrowed. What? I held her gaze. Respect, I said. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It settled, quietly, deeply. She nodded slowly. I see that now, she said, and this time there was no hesitation in her voice. No resistance, just acceptance. I leaned back slightly, feeling something inside me finally begin to loosen. Not everything, but enough. Good, I said. There was a pause. Then she spoke again. So what happens now? She asked. I considered that, because this time, the question wasn't about money. It was about us. We move forward, I said. She nodded. Together, she asked carefully. I looked at her, really looked, at the woman she had become, at the mistakes she had made, at the moment she was standing in now, certain exposed, but still here, trying. Carefully, I said. Her lips pressed together slightly, but she nodded. I can do that, she said. I believed her. Not completely, not yet, but enough to give her the chance. That's all I'm asking, I said. Daniel stepped forward, then his presence reminding us that we weren't alone in this moment. If there's nothing further, he said politely, we can finalize today's session. I nodded. Yes, I said. Thank you. He inclined his head slightly. It's been my pleasure, Mrs. Reed. Then he turned to Emily. Miss Carter. She nodded once. Thank you, she said. Her tone was different now. Respectful, measured, not performative. Real. He acknowledged it with a small nod and stepped away, giving us space once more. Emily picked up her bag slowly. Her movements were more deliberate now, less rushed, less controlled, more aware. I'll call you later, she said. I nodded. I'd like that, I replied. She hesitated again. Then, almost as if she was unsure whether she was allowed to, she stepped forward and reached out. Not fully, just a small gesture. A question. I looked at her hand, then at her, and after a brief moment, I reached out too. Her hand was warm, familiar, but different. Not the same as before, because this time there was no assumption behind it, no control, just connection. Brief, fragile, but real. I'm sorry, she said again, barely above a whisper. I squeezed her hand lightly. I know, I said. She nodded, then let go, and turned to leave. I watched her walk away through the glass doors of the bank, her steps slower than before, her posture less rigid, her world slightly shifted, just like mine had been. When the doors closed behind her, I stood there for a moment longer, letting everything settle. The silence, the truth, the weight of what had happened. And then I picked up my purse. The same one, the one she had judged, the one I had carried without explanation. And I held it differently now, not because it had changed, but because I had. For years, I had lived quietly, carefully, believing that what mattered most didn't need to be seen. And maybe I was still right about that. But I had also learned something else. Silence can sometimes be misunderstood, not because people are cruel, but because they don't know what they're not shown. I walked toward the exit slowly. Not rushed, not uncertain, just steady. And as I stepped outside into the light, I realized something simple. I hadn't lost anything today. Not my dignity, not my control, not even my relationship with my daughter. What I had gained was clarity. And sometimes that's worth more than anything money can ever buy. The drive home felt longer than usual, not because of traffic, not because of distance, but because my mind refused to settle into silence. Everything that had happened at the bank replayed in fragments, Emily's voice sharp and certain, then uncertain, then quiet. The look on her face when she saw the numbers, the way her hand hesitated before reaching for mine. And underneath it all, something deeper, a shift. Not just in her, in me. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment longer than I needed to. The house looked the same as it always had, small, modest, quiet. Unimpressive, at least by the standards Emily had been living by. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't see it through her eyes. I saw it through mine. And there was nothing lacking about it. Inside the house greeted me the way it always did, with stillness. No noise, no clutter, no urgency. Just the quiet rhythm of a life that had never needed to prove itself. I placed my purse on the table and walked slowly into the kitchen. The same kitchen. The same place where Emily used to stand on a chair beside me, trying to flip pancakes that always folded in half. I rested my hand lightly on the counter, and for a moment I let myself feel it. Not the tension, not the conflict, but the loss. Because somewhere along the way, we had lost something. Not completely, but enough to matter. The sound of my phone vibrating pulled me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Emily. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to choose how I stepped into this moment. Not react. Respond. After a few seconds, I picked up. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Short, but noticeable. Mom. Her voice came through softer than I had ever heard it. Yes. I just wanted to make sure you got home okay. I almost smiled. It was such a small thing, but it hadn't been there before. I did, I said. Thank you. Another pause. I've been thinking, she said. I assumed you would, I replied gently. A faint exhale. I didn't realize how much I've been looking at things the wrong way, she admitted. I leaned against the counter, listening. Go on, I said. I've built my whole life around success, she continued. Around growth numbers, results. That's how I measure everything. It's how I know I'm doing well. That's not unusual, I said. I know, she replied. But I think somewhere along the way, I started using that same measurement on people. There it was. Clear, direct, uncomfortable. I looked at you and saw what you didn't show, she said, and I assumed that meant you didn't have it. I closed my eyes briefly. Not out of pain, out of recognition. Yes, I said quietly, and I never stopped to ask why, she added. That's the part that matters, I said. She was silent for a moment. I think I was afraid of the answer, she admitted. I opened my eyes again. Why? Because if you chose that life, she said slowly, then it meant I was the one who didn't understand something. And I didn't like that. Honesty. Raw. Unfiltered. I appreciate you saying that. I said, I should have said it sooner, she replied. Maybe I said, but you're saying it now. There was a softness in the silence that followed. Not empty, but open. I keep thinking about what you said, she continued. Which part? That help doesn't look like taking something without asking. I nodded to myself. Yes. I thought I was being responsible, she said. But I wasn't. I was being controlling. That's a hard thing to admit, I said. It is, she agreed. Another pause. Then, do you think you can ever trust me again? She asked. There it was, the question. The one that matters more than any number on any page. I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't something you answer quickly or lightly. Trust doesn't come back all at once. I said finally. I know she said quickly. But it can come back. I continued. She went quiet. You're going to have to earn it, I said. Not with words, with actions. I will, she said. Her voice was steady, not desperate, not performative, committed. I'm willing to see that, I said. A small breath of relief came through the phone. Thank you, she said. We stood there in that shared silence again, miles apart, but closer than we had been in a long time. I also need to say something else, she added. Go ahead. I don't want your money, she said. The words came quickly, firmly. I never should have tried to take control of it, and I don't want anything from that account. I listened carefully, because this mattered. I'm glad you said that, I replied. I mean it, she insisted. I want to build my own life, my own success, the right way. You already have, I said. She hesitated. Maybe, she said, but not in the way I thought. I smiled softly to myself. That's called growing, I said. She let out a quiet laugh. Feels more like being humbled, she said. That too, I admitted. Another pause, but this one felt lighter. I was thinking she said maybe we could have dinner sometime this week. I raised an eyebrow slightly, even though she couldn't see me. Dinner? Yes, she said. At your place, if that's okay. I looked around the kitchen again, at the worn counter, the quiet space, the life she had once dismissed. It is, I said. I'd like that, she replied. So would I. We didn't say goodbye right away, not because we had more to say, but because we didn't want to rush the moment. And when we finally did hang up, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something else, something quieter, something slower, but something real. A beginning. Dinner happened 3 nights later. And I'll be honest, I almost canceled. Not because I didn't want to see Emily, but because I didn't know what version of us would be sitting at that table. The old one, the distant one, or something new, something still fragile, still forming. I stood in the kitchen that afternoon, staring at the same counter I had leaned against just days before. My hands rested on the edge, just like they had then, but this time there was something else beneath the stillness. Nervousness. Not fear, just uncertainty, because rebuilding something is always harder than holding it together. I kept things simple. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the same kind of meal I used to make when Emily was younger, back when she didn't care about presentation, back when she just cared that I made it. By the time the sun began to dip lower outside the window, everything was ready. The table was set. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 people who were about to try again. The knock came exactly at 6. Not early, not late. Right on time. That too was new. I walked to the door, paused for just a second, then opened it. Emily stood there. No heels this time, no blazer, no polished image. Just a simple sweater, her hair pulled back loosely, her face softer. More real. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. There was a brief moment where neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward, and I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked into the house slowly, her eyes taking in the space like she was seeing it for the first time, which in a way she was. "It smells good," she said. "Thank you." She glanced around the living room, at the old couch, the bookshelf, the framed photos, ones she hadn't looked at in years. "You didn't change anything," she said. "No," I replied. "I didn't need to." She nodded slowly. "I think I understand that now." I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, but because I wanted to see if she would keep going, and she did. "I used to think this place meant you were stuck," she said, "that you never moved forward." I leaned lightly against the doorway, listening. But now, I think she hesitated, searching for the words, "Maybe you just didn't need to chase what I was chasing." I felt something shift in my chest. "That's closer," I said. She smiled faintly. "I'm trying. I can see that." We moved into the kitchen together. She stopped when she saw the table. "You made all this?" she asked. "Yes." Her eyes lingered on the food for a moment. Then she looked at me again. "You didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to." That mattered. She seemed to understand that. We sat down across from each other, the same way we had done so many times before. But this time, everything felt different. Not distant, not forced, just careful. So she said, picking up her fork, "Where do we start?" I almost smiled. "That's a good question." She let out a small breath. "I don't want to pretend nothing happened," she said, "but I also don't want to stay stuck in it." "That's fair," I said. She nodded. "I think I've spent a long time defining things the wrong way," she continued. "Success, value, even people." I watched her closely. "And now?" I asked. She looked around the room again, at the simple space she once dismissed. "At least now I know I was wrong," she said. "That's a start," I replied. She took a small bite of food, chewing slowly. "This is really good," she said after a moment. "Thank you." There was a pause, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was natural, like we were remembering how to exist in the same space again. "I used to be embarrassed bringing people here," she admitted suddenly. I didn't react immediately. I let her sit with it. "I know." Like we were remembering how to exist in the same space again. "I used to be embarrassed bringing people here," she admitted suddenly. I didn't react immediately. I let her sit with it. "I know," I said. She looked down at her plate. "I'm really sorry for that," she said. "I know," I repeated. She glanced up. "You keep saying that," she said. "But I don't know if you really do." I held her gaze. "I do," I said, "because I've been a mother longer than you've been an adult." She blinked. "That doesn't mean I accept it," I added. "It just means I understand it." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense." We continued eating, talking, not about money, not about the account, but about small things. Work, neighbors, memories. At one point, she laughed. Not politely, not carefully, genuinely. And it caught me off guard, because I hadn't heard that laugh in a long time. "You remember the pancakes?" she asked suddenly. I smiled. "The ones you kept burning." "I didn't burn them," she protested lightly. "They were just creatively cooked." I laughed softly. "That's one way to put it." She shook her head, smiling. I used to think that was the best thing ever. I didn't burn them, she protested lightly. They were just creatively cooked. I laughed softly. That's one way to put it. She shook her head, smiling. I used to think that was the best thing ever. It was, I said, even though they were terrible, especially because they were terrible. She smiled again, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to stand on that chair beside me, not the woman who stood in a bank and called me poor, not the person who tried to take control of something that wasn't hers. Just my daughter. After dinner, she helped clear the table, without being asked, without hesitation. Another small thing, but it mattered. When we finished, we stood in the kitchen again, not quite ready to end the night. This felt good, she said. It did, I agreed. She hesitated, then spoke again. I know I have a lot to fix, she said. Yes, I said honestly. She nodded. But I want to, she added. I studied her face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that suggested this was temporary. But I didn't see it. Just effort. I believe you, I said. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you. She picked up her bag, moved toward the door, then paused. Can I come back next week? She asked. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want her to, but because I wanted her to understand what she was asking. This isn't going to be instant, I said. I know. It's going to take time. I know. And it's going to take consistency. I know. I held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. Yes, I said, you can come back. A small smile appeared on her face. Not big, not dramatic, but real. I'd like that, she said. So would I. She stepped outside, turned once more. Good night, Mom. Good night, Emily. And as the door closed behind her, I didn't feel the emptiness I used to feel. I felt something else. Something quieter, something steady. Hope. A few weeks passed, not dramatically, not in some sweeping cinematic way where everything suddenly became perfect, but in small, steady steps. And those steps mattered more. Emily kept coming back. Not every day, not even every few days, but consistently. And consistency, I learned, is where real change lives. The second dinner was quieter, less careful. We didn't circle around the past as much. We acknowledged it, but we didn't let it define every moment. She asked questions instead of assuming. She listened more than she spoke, and I noticed something else. She wasn't trying to impress me anymore. She was trying to understand me. That was new. One evening, about a month after the bank, she showed up earlier than expected. She knocked, then opened the door slightly. Hey, she said, stepping in. I hope it's okay. I brought something. She held up a small grocery bag. What is it? I asked. She smiled a little. Pancake mix, she said. I couldn't help it. I laughed. You're serious? Very, she replied. I figured we could try again. I shook my head, smiling as I stepped aside. All right, I said, but this time I'm supervising. Hey, she protested lightly. I've improved. Well, see, we stood in the kitchen together again, not as strangers, not as two people standing on opposite sides of something broken, but as two people trying to rebuild something that mattered. She climbed onto the same spot she used to stand as a child, though this time she didn't need the chair. I remember messing this up, she said. You didn't mess it up, I corrected. You just made it your own way. She glanced at me. That's a nice way of saying I burned them. That too, I admitted. She laughed, and this time it stayed. We made pancakes. They weren't perfect. One folded too early, one stuck to the pan. One, yes, was slightly burned, but neither of us cared. Because it wasn't about the pancakes. It was about the moment. I've been thinking about something, she said as she flipped one carefully. What is it? If you hadn't gone to the bank that day, if I had just gotten you to sign? She paused, glancing at me. Everything would be different. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. She swallowed. I don't like that version of me, she admitted. I watched her carefully. That's a good thing, I said. Why? Because it means you're not her anymore. She didn't respond right away. She just stared at the pan, watching the batter bubble slightly. I really thought I was doing the right thing, she said quietly. I know, and I really thought you were less than what you are. I didn't flinch this time, because now she understood what that meant. I know, I said again. She exhaled slowly. I'm sorry for that, she added. I know, I repeated softer this time. She looked up. Do you ever wish you had told me earlier? She asked. I considered that, truly considered it. No, I said. She frowned slightly. Why not? Because then you wouldn't have learned it, I replied. She tilted her head. Learned what? That people don't become valuable just because you discover something about them, I said. They were always valuable. You just didn't see it. She went quiet. That one stayed with her. I could tell. We finished cooking, sat down at the table, and for a while we just ate. No tension, no heavy conversations, just presence. After a few minutes, she leaned back slightly, looking around the room again. I used to think success looked like everything I built, she said. And now, I asked. She smiled faintly. Now I think it looks more like this, she said, gesturing around us. This? Yeah, she said. Being able to sit somewhere that's real, with someone who doesn't need anything from you except honesty. I felt something settle in my chest. That's a better definition, I said. She nodded. I think so too. Yeah, she said. Being able to sit somewhere that's real, with someone who doesn't need anything from you except honesty. I felt something settle in my chest. That's a better definition, I said. She nodded. I think so too. There was a pause. Then she spoke again. What are you going to do with the account, she asked. The question was different now. Not curious in a controlling way, just curious. I haven't decided, I said. She nodded. That's fair. I might leave it exactly the way it is, I added. She smiled slightly. That sounds like you. I smiled back. And if I ever decide to change something, I continued, I'll let you know. She met my eyes. Not because you have to, she said. Because I choose to. I corrected. She nodded. I understand. And this time, she really did. We sat there for a while longer, talking, laughing, remembering. And when she finally stood to leave, it didn't feel like something fragile was about to break again. It felt steady. Good night, Mom, she said. Good night, Emily. She paused at the door, then turned back. Hey, she said. Yes. And when she finally stood to leave, it didn't feel like something fragile was about to break again. It felt steady. Good night, Mom, she said. Good night, Emily. She paused at the door, then turned back. Hey, she said. Yes, I'm really glad you didn't sign that paper. I smiled softly. So am I. She nodded, then left. And as the door closed behind her, I stood there for a moment, not thinking about the bank, not thinking about the money, but thinking about something far more valuable: perspective. Because the truth is, money didn't change who I was. It didn't give me power. It didn't give me worth. It simply revealed something that had always been there. And the same was true for Emily. She didn't become better because she apologized. She became better because she understood, because she saw, because she chose to change. And that's something no amount of money can ever buy. After everything that happened, I realized something simple but powerful. We often think value is something we can measure, something we can see, something we can prove with number status or success. But the truth is, the most important things in life don't work that way. Respect doesn't come from what someone has. Love doesn't come from what someone shows. And understanding doesn't come from assumptions. It comes from listening, from asking, from being willing to admit when you are wrong. If you've ever been misunderstood or judged too quickly, I hope this story reminded you of something important. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who refuses to see it. But for those who are willing to learn, there is always a way back. If this story meant something to you, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a moment where someone completely misjudged you? Or maybe where you realized you misjudged someone else? Tell me in the comments. And if you'd like more stories like this, real, emotional, and meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe. You're not alone in what you've lived. And sometimes sharing it is where healing begins. Sometimes life doesn't break us with big events. It quietly reveals the truth through small, painful moments. What happened between Catherine and her daughter wasn't really about money. It was about perception, about how easily we assign value to people based on what we see, or what we think we see. We live in a world that teaches us to measure everything: success, worth, even love, through visible proof. A bigger house means success. Expensive clothes mean status. A quiet life must mean failure. But the truth is, the most meaningful lives are often the ones that don't need to be displayed. They are built on sacrifice, patience, and choices that no one else sees. Catherine didn't hide her worth. She simply didn't feel the need to prove it. And Emily didn't intend to hurt her mother. She just forgot to look deeper. That's the lesson here: misunderstanding doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from assumptions left unchecked for too long. Respect is not something you give when you discover someone's value. It's something you offer even before you fully understand it. And love, real love, is not proven in grand gestures, but in the quiet willingness to listen, to admit you were wrong, and to grow from it. If there's one thing this story reminds us, it's this: never reduce someone to what they show you, because behind what you see, there is always more. If this story touched you, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been misunderstood, or maybe realized you misjudged someone you love? Share your experience in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, deep, emotional, and meaningful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I'm grateful you're here.